keeping right along with fall camp, Jordan, let's go ahead and turn it over to the other side of the ball. And I mentioned this earlier that the offense and the defensive line have been going at it. They've been winning reps here and there. Not one unit has dominated the other, which is a good sign when you're heading into a big season like Clemson is. But let's talk a little bit about this defensive line. I know everybody who has dived deep into Clemson, all the Clemson fans in here know the four guys that are going to run out there first for the Clemson Tigers. But let's talk a little bit about the depth that we have heard from Dabo Swinney, from others when it comes to these fall camp intel returns and what this defensive line is shaping up depth-wise for the 2025 season.
Yeah, they continue to be extremely pleased with the development of the defensive ends in particular. We've talked ad nauseum. I mean, it was a big problem last year, a big reason why down the stretch you just couldn't stop anybody, especially in the run game, is because you just didn't have quality depth at defensive end and a quality play at that position. TJ Parker is fantastic, but he's only one guy. Right. You need to have guys that, and Peter Woods playing limited and moving in and out between, playing on the interior and playing at defensive end. It wasn't a good situation. They were confident about it, in the preseason, but that was, you turned a truly elite player into a good one by forcing him to play out of position, and then the injuries piled up. But now, I think they've done a fantastic job. Obviously, bringing in Will Helt has been a massive, massive thing for this group. They feel really confident on what he's going to be, and they feel like they have a guy that's going to play at an extremely high level for them. And so now that you feel like you have a true starting four, front four that you feel comfortable playing, now it's time to build that depth behind those guys. And obviously, the guys that we were looking at the most were the guys that played the most down the stretch last year. Jaheim Lawson, Cade Denhoff, are guys that also got a lot of praise. Today from Dabo Swinney after the scrimmage, and obviously Jaheim Lawson has had a tremendous camp in general. They feel like they have, four starters at defensive end. And so I think if that's true, then that's a massive, massive step from where you were last year, where you feel like you only had one true starter at defensive end and a bunch of guys that you were just kind of rotating in and out, but you didn't really feel comfortable playing a whole bunch, which is why you made the Peter Woods move in the first place. So, I think you have considerably better depth just from having Will Helt on the roster, but the jump that Jaheim Lawson has made, I think is especially exciting because it's been consistent. The praise has been consistent. I think that's one of the things you always want to hear is you can hear guys that play well on a particular day, they have a good day, but it's the Jaheim Lawson praise has been consistent from multiple angles, from all sides. And those are the type of guys where you feel a little bit better about it actually coming to fruition on the field. I think Jaheim Lawson is a guy that is going to potentially have a really, really strong year for you. And so if you can have that alone is a big deal. But if Cade Denhoff, as an older guy, if he can step up his play, he got praised from Dabo today. Then you feel in a much better shape and a lot more comfortable with where you are on the defensive end depth. So excited to see those guys, Jaheim especially, just because he's a guy that's been in the program a long time, always had the potential, the long-term potential, but it seems like it's being realized in front of our eyes. And if he, if he has reached that point, then I think we're gonna have a lot of fun watching him this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the question marks along the defensive side of the ball is the depth on defensive end, and you kind of outlined that perfectly, Jordan. And the returns that you've heard so far out of fall camp from Dabo, and from some of the players and stuff, you're feeling really good if you're a Clemson fan right now, because the guys that you needed to take a step this season have appeared, from reports that they have taken that step, and that is a huge thing. That was one of the issues on this team last year. That's part of the reason that you gave 300 yards up against the Citadel. That's part of the reason that Texas ran all over you. That's part of the reason that South Carolina ran all over you. That's part of the reason that Louisville ran all over you. That's part of the reason that you got dominated, physically at the point of attack in a lot of games last year. And that seems to have been corrected this offseason. And you mentioned the consistency of praise for Jaheim Lawson. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that Clemson fans can hold on to. It's not that just, oh, he flashed in scrimmage 1, or, oh, he flashed in scrimmage 2, or, oh, he flashed in spring. You saw him coming on last year. You saw him growing within games. Yeah, did he make a lot of mistakes? Absolutely. Was he not a complete player last year? Absolutely. But it seems that he has taken the proper steps this offseason to become a more complete defensive end, not just a pass rush specialist, but a guy that can be serviceable when it comes to setting the edge on running plays at defensive end. And that's a huge thing. And then you heard Dabo talk about Cade Denhoff, about he's, that basically help Jaheim Lawson, Cade Denhoff, they're ones. That he considers Jaheim Lawson and Cade Denhoff a one. So that means that, like you mentioned, you got 4 guys that can rotate in at defensive end that the coaching staff feels comfortable enough to call them quote unquote ones. Okay. So I think that's a big thing. And then he talked about Caden Story. He talked about Marcus Dixon. He talked about guys that are considered their twos that have taken steps as well. So I think in 2025, you are in such a better position when it comes to the defensive end position than you were in 2024. And that was one of the biggest keys to just becoming an overall better team in 2025 than you were in 2024. And then the interior of the defensive line, he talked about Stephylon Green and Vic Burley. Stephylon Green, he considers a 1. Vic Burley, he considers a quality 2. So you're getting that depth in the inside, which we don't have as many questions about the interior of that defensive line as we do as the ends. But again, it's nice to hear that those guys are taking that next step as well to give quality depth for Peter Woods and DeMonte Capehart, who are obviously going to run out there first.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and yeah, you feel really comfortable with the quality you have there. Stephylon Green, the praise he's gotten doesn't surprise me. I'm a big Stephylon Green truther.
Yeah.
This has been a long time coming. I'm excited to see him play. Didn't I say he could be I think I said he could be an all ACC player coming off the bench. So that's how I feel about it.
You called that earlier in the summer. So yeah. If we're going off of fall camp, it sounds like Jordan knows what he's talking about. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm gonna ring my bell. I'm gonna toot my horn, do all that. That's one that I've been beating since he signed. So I'm just excited to see that starting to come to fruition. He's been behind some dogs. So and now he's going to get a real opportunity this year. Vic Burley, the steps he's made as a guy that came in with, obviously tore his ACL his first season, it kind of spent his whole career behind the 8 ball, but it finally seems like he's coming along and you feel comfortable putting him in. I don't know if you'll see him get the same level of snaps that Stephylon Green will play. Like you said, he's probably a more quality 2 than a 1 right now. But I think that the talent is tremendous, and I think he's a guy that you could just see grow over the course of the season. And then that's not even talking about what they see in Amari Adams and what he brings to that room. So I think I think it not only does it mean you have elite caliber depth at defensive tackle, But now you have you give the guys, the younger guys, the developmental guys, room to grow. The Heaven Brown Schulers, the Champ Thompsons, the Mekhi Williams Lees of the world. Like those are guys that can step in and continue to grow, because because those are guys that I think are more long term projections than guys that'll be guys you're going to be relying on. So I think you got to feel comfortable with where you're at as far as that depth chart is concerned. And that's why I think this defensive line is in much better shape heading into 2025, and excited to see that group, the defensive tackles especially, go out there, because I think you have guys that teams are going to be terrified to block. And LSU with all the issues they've had, offensive line wise, as it seems throughout spring and fall. I mean, you can't ask for a better situation, I think, if you're Clemson on that front. So we'll see.
You need those guys to step up week one. And it sounds like that's happening in a big way. Last position group we're going to hit on before we transition into talking to Rec Talk tonight is obviously the secondary. We got to hit on that a little bit. The secondary depth, the growth that has happened in the secondary over this fall camp has been truly amazing. I mean, the reports have been great. Scrimmage 1. Brandon Strozier and Tink Kelly come away with 2 pick sixes, 2 scores for the defense. And if you're a Clemson fan, you might be thinking, oh, what does that mean for the offense? Tink Kelly obviously intercepted one of Cade Klubnik's passes, took it back to the house. According to Dabo Swinney, it was a late shift, and they kind of caught Cade in a bad way, and he didn't really see that late shift that they did, and Tink Kelly took advantage of it. And then Brandon Strozier got an interception against the backup quarterback, CV, right? And he not only did he get a interception, but he had a very physical play in getting that ball to the end zone. He was not satisfied with only getting an interception. He was looking to score. He was looking to do damage for the Clemson Tiger defense. And that's one of those things that you love to see out of these secondary players. Safety has been a big plus for Clemson this fall camp. There's a ton of guys that can go out there and play. There's a lot of competition at that position. And it just seems that they're taking that next step as a secondary group, and they're going to need to. As elite as this defensive line is, we are going to need this secondary to step up in a big way if Clemson's going to go where we think they could possibly go in 2025.
100%. And, I think at corner, they feel, that was one thing we were kind of, monitoring throughout the spring and obviously heading into fall camp was, are those guys, lower in the depth chart at corner going to be able to be playable? Because, there was a lot of questions there. You mentioned Brandon Strozier. Dabo talked about him today. Said, last season he was hanging off the edge of the cliff. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, and they threw him a lifeline. And they've been extremely pleased with the jump he's made this offseason. If you can have him play at a high level, that's big. Corian Gibson, I'm super high on his long-term potential. A guy that kind of came in behind the 8 ball because of the ACL injury heading into his freshman year. And so, you have 2 guys that have taken massive leaps in the offseason. And, especially when you have a guy like Jaden Lucas, who you feel like is a starting caliber corner for you, but his availability throughout his career has always been a question. You need to have that quality depth. Shelton Lewis, who flashed as a freshman, dealt with injuries last season, but we know that he's a guy that gives you a lot of position versatility. He can play corner, he can play nickel, and he can give you a lot of versatility in the defense. And then you mentioned Tink Kelly, who's came to Clemson as a receiver, worked out there for a little bit. But they decided to make the move to defensive back, and from all reports, it's been a revelation, and he's really come along. If you have 5-6 guys that you feel comfortable playing at corner, that's much better than just than having Avion Terrell and Ashton Hampton eating up the majority of the snaps and hoping those guys stay healthy. But yeah, you mentioned the safety room. I'm super excited. I think, this room, with the departure of R.J. Mickens and some of the questions that we had because of that, the fact that they feel like they have just a room full of dudes is really, really exciting. I've been really pleased with the safety recruiting over the last few cycles, but you just didn't know. You just have a lot of guys that haven't played. The Ricardo Jones, the Ronan Hannafins of the world that have really put themselves in the position to be starters. Kylan Griffin has been in the program a long time. Those guys have to be ready to play. And if you have now, I think you have a room that with different body types, different skill sets. You got thumpers, you got guys that can run and cover. You got guys that can play nickel if need be. Khalil Barnes, of course, is a guy that I think is going to be a featured part of this defense, and I think he's truly going to have a bounce back year. After kind of struggling a little bit, and kind of being in limbo at safety and nickel throughout the season last year. I think you're going to see his role start to settle, and I think you're going to see what we saw from him as a freshman. So you put all of that together. I mean, I think the secondary, while it's not, I wouldn't say it's complete, and we know what we're going to get, but outside of your two corners, you feel a lot more comfortable, I think, now than you did, heading into spring, earlier this year. So I think the secondary has, they made plays. Yeah, I mean, I don't mind hearing that Cade Klubnik threw a pick six because they made a late shift and those guys went out and made plays. Like that's what we want. We want this defense to be able to make plays. So they have the talent. Those types of players are what propel you from a pretty, by Clemson standards, pretty bad, honestly, the defense to one of the best in the country, which I think that they certainly have the talent to be. So I think that's really encouraging. So the two scrimmages, I think the staff seems to be pleased on all, on pretty much all fronts. That doesn't mean anything, but you definitely feel much better that there seems to be, the depth at the positions we had questions about is growing, and guys that we expected to hear about playing well, they are. And so that's how you become a national championship team or a college football playoff contending team, is you have that quality, at multiple levels. So.
Yeah, absolutely. You need depth throughout the season. Everybody knows the attrition of football. It's a long season. It's a marathon. You're going to get injuries. You're going to get guys banged up. You're going to have to rely on depth at some point in time in your season, in some game within your season. You're going to have those 2 and 3 guys to step up in a big way and win games for you. And it seems that Clemson is trending in the right direction when it comes to that.